So thank you all for coming to this. I in my head I thought if we had 4 people and 2 of them were my parents, that was going to be pretty good, and so many more. So that's really great. This is my first time talking through this talk here. So I don't know if this will be 5 minutes or 5 hours, but we'll make it fit into the right amount of time. Which is, Josh, how long are we aiming for? Hour and a half. Okay. So we'll hopefully it'll be more like 5 hours that we'll pare down. And at any point during this, if there's any questions, just feel free to raise your hand and ask. And if it's later in the talk, I'll just tell you it's later in the talk. And if I don't know the answer, then I'll say that's a terrible question, and then pretend I knew the answer. But I'll just tell you if I don't actually know. So this is the story of nutrition. I'm Joel Hunter. I'm a doctor, and I do specifically eye surgery. I got super interested in this stuff about 3 years ago, and you know, it's like any other hobby where the deeper you dive, the more you learn, and you realize there's a lot more complication on the surface of the waters, which everybody has seen, and the deeper you go, there are currents to this that make everything kind of work together. In full disclosure, I can just tell you that while medical school and residency and all that was very helpful in preparing to learn about this stuff and to be able to find the right resources and being able to dissect and get through different studies. Medical school in itself, as many of you will probably know from just talking to physicians, it's not great in the field of just health. It's really good sick care, but doctors in general, nutrition is it's not anathema to them, but it's certainly not their field of expertise. And a lot of the stuff that gets repeated for dietary guidelines and ways to lose weight is not very helpful. And sometimes downright harmful. So we're going to go through that. And anytime I'm making a bold claim here, I'll try to cite the study. And if you see one that doesn't have a study cited, I promise there is one behind it. So just point it out, and that way I'll be able to track it down and find it for you. So first things first. This is. I wonder how to get that part to go away. Huh. Well, it's all right. So this is, I challenged myself, I made this slide last night actually, because I was like, I wonder in 60 seconds how many different diet names I can come up with, and this was the result. And so, there's a varying levels of scientific validity here, and all of them kind of revolve around the same thing, even things like fasting and the ketogenic diet, which are much more focused on the nutrients that you're placing in your body and how that affects nutrient sensors in your body, rather than focusing specifically on calories in versus calories out. All of them are one way or another revolving around the same central idea of this eating less and moving more. And eat less, move more, everyone has heard that. It got big traction when Michelle Obama was planting gardens and trying to remember how mad everybody got when they tried to make kids eat vegetables? There was people really not pleased with that. And school lunches, that's a whole different thing, but they're all based on the same general dietary guidelines that focus on this idea of eating less and moving more. Now the thing with all of these diets, including things that are, and I hope this doesn't offend anyone, including things that are crazy, like the blood type diet, which is odd. You're like a vampire. All of these work. Every single one of these works. And the reason for that is if you bring in less... Oh, I wondered what that was. If you bring in less energy than you are expending, then you will lose weight, because ultimately calories are a unit of energy. So there's this idea of energy balance, and in all of this, whether it's as simple as just saying, hey, just eat less food, or hey, you have type A blood, so eat avocados, or what, I don't even know how the blood type diet works or doesn't work. All of them, including all the way up to ones that are really scientifically sound, like Renaissance periodization, the RP diet that's popular in CrossFit. they all revolve around the same idea, which is at its core, calories are energy. And so if you are expending more energy than you are taking in, you will lose weight. If you are bringing in more energy in the form of calories than you are expending, then you will gain weight. 100% of the time that is true, and this is where everyone that's really purely on the calories in, calories out model, they will talk about, you can't break the first law of thermodynamics. CICO, which is CICO, calories in, calories out, those guys, they love talking about the first law of thermodynamics. No matter, they'll bring it into any time this is coming up, they'll talk about the first law of thermodynamics, which is that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. And then there are people from the hormonal school of this that talk about how hormones affect this stuff, and they bring up the second law of thermodynamics, which we're going to get into in a little bit, but just as a teaser. That is that in a closed system, entropy will increase, disorder will increase in a closed system. The third law of thermodynamics has nothing to do with this. That is that perfect order will exist in a crystalline state at 0 Kelvin, which doesn't come up because it's very cold. So the first and second law of thermodynamics, they both come up, but the first law wins out more, and it's because it is true. If you bring in more energy, it's not going to just vanish. It's going to go somewhere. And the way that our body stores energy, except for a very small amount of glycogen stores, which does store ready to use glucose, it's in the form of fat. We're really good at storing fat, thanks to a couple million years of evolution, making it that we could survive between periods of finding the next herd of whatever, buffaloes. So the next thing that we're going to talk about here is why eat less, move more isn't specifically helpful. And before we go to that, it's eating less and moving more. Saying if you bring in, that having extra weight on you is the result of having more calories than you need. It's comparable to saying poverty is a result of having more dollars going out than dollars coming in. It is true. I mean, it's absolutely true, and just useless as far as creating a policy, because everyone knows that poverty is caused by not having enough dollars. That's not a mystery to anyone, yet it still exists, and that's because monetary policy, now there may be disagreements on the best way to handle it, but everyone agrees that just saying, well, you're poor because you don't have enough money, it's a tautology. It doesn't help anyone. And so to say to someone, you weigh more than you should because you have too many calories, well, thank you. Yeah, that's good. I'm cured. So there's a reason that it doesn't work, and a big part of that reason is this eat less, move more. It creates this false sense of, hold on, I can go to my next slide now. Hold on. Perfect. It creates this false sense that eating less and moving more is this 50-50 shared, it's like two legs walking you. They both are equally important in getting you to the goal. Exercise is absolutely important. It is essential for certain parts to staying healthy and living the longest and best life that you can. But to say that it is 50-50 when it comes to maintaining or losing weight, or if you're wanting to just gain muscle, going through a bulking phase, to say that exercise and eating are 50-50 is it's flat out untrue. It is much more that the whole idea of eat less and move more, it's much closer to a 90-10 type of thing. 90% of this is diet, 10% of this is exercise. And that's if you're somebody that just casually exercises, which probably not a lot of you here, because we have this awesome gym and Martrice to tell us what to do with this gym. But even if you are intensely exercising, it might be 80-20. And then if you get into the point where you're, an Olympic athlete and you're somebody that's a world-class athlete, maybe you can push it up to where it's 60-40, a diet and exercise. But the diet part to this, the fuel that you are feeding into your body, is by far the most important component when it comes to the rest of this talk is going to be about losing weight, because that's where 99% of us, that's what most of us care about, specifically about losing fat, and ideally losing fat in a way that maintains the most muscle, or even more ideally losing fat in a way that we can gain muscle at the same time, something that some people call main gaining, which is a cool saying. I'm going to start saying it actually. Main gaining, which is losing fat and gaining muscle at the same time, which is possible, by the way. It's a doable thing. So it's 90% diet, 10% exercise, if you just kind of look on average for people. And that part is really, really important, because it's... If you were if you're in a history class and the professor said you have a test that is, this will determine your grade in the class, 90% of this test is going to be able to list the presidents in order from George Washington up to Biden. That's 90% of your grade. 10% of it's going to be knowing the amendments to the Constitution. It would be foolish to spend 50% of your time studying the presidents and 50% studying the amendments. You would want to focus 90% of your attention on what's going to determine 90% of your grade. And it's the same thing when we're talking about losing weight. When you look at diet and exercise as these 50-50 things, and again, exercise is important. I'm just going to say that as a blanket thing so I don't have to just keep saying it over and over, because it is. When you're looking at diet and exercise as these 50-50 things, it uses up some of your willpower, some of your reserve, if you're splitting it 50-50, when you could be focusing much more on the part that's actually going to manifest the most difference, which is the foods that you take in. So the reason that this part matters, and the reason that it's not just like, okay, so think about it more, is because there's actual steps that you can take, and those steps matter because the food that you take in, and we'll get into what we mean by the food that you take in, but we're talking about the type of food you take in and the amount of food you take in and the timing of when you take in those foods. They determine the calories that you are consuming, but they also have a big influence on the calories that you are using. They determine energy in, and they also largely determine the energy out. Because when we think of energy out, typically, I know for me anyway, your mind jumps to exercise, which is energy out. You are expending energy. If you go hard on a bike for 2 hours, you can burn anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500 calories. And so you think of exercise as calories out. But the majority of the calories that we burn, even if you are pretty strenuous in your exercise, and you exercise every single day, still the majority of the calories we burn are not burned in exercise, which I think takes me to my next slide. Yes. Hold on. Smooth transitions. Okay. So this is generally, like, whether people are carnivore or keto or South Beach diet or strict CECO, calorie in, calorie out people, most people agree on the validity of this. There may be some quibbling over the percentages, 5% here or there, but this is what we talk about when we're talking about the calories that we expend. And so to walk through what each of these mean, over there on the left, that's the percent of TDEE, which is your total daily energy expenditure. So all of the calories that you burn in a 24-hour period is your TDEE, and that includes literally everything that requires calories. The secret here is that the majority of what requires those calories is, and it might be, as low as 50% or as high as 70, 75%, depending on how lethargic you are, but BMR, which is your basal metabolic rate, that's, which is the same thing as saying REE, which is your resting energy expenditure. That's the calories you would burn if you were in coma, or if you were just laying in bed all day, where Netflix asks you every 3 episodes, are you still watching? And you just move one finger and yeah, I'm watching still. Don't judge me, Netflix. So that is your basal metabolic rate. It is a surprisingly large percentage of the calories that we burn, but it is expensive calorically. It is expensive energy expenditure-wise to stay alive. There is a lot of cellular respiration going on in your body at any given moment. Your brain weighs about 2% of your total body mass. It expends about 25% of your caloric expenditure. That's a lot of expending. It burns up a lot of your calories. As a guy who operates on eyes for a living, I'll just tell you, about 50% of that is visual, which is interesting. So if you want to burn a lot of calories, just watch trains go by or something. That's a pro tip for you. So you burn tons and tons of calories just doing things that you're not even realizing you're doing, like thinking. And so when we talk about burning calories without exercise, for me anyway, my mind would jump to, okay, yeah, because I walked to the car and this and that. But no, this is stuff like breathing, your heart beating, doing your thinking. Again, 25% of your calories is that. And the heat that we generate, we have mitochondria that are constantly producing ATP. We are burning calories and using ATP to do that. In a given day, your body produces in volume. ATP is a tiny molecule. It is like you can. It's made up. Oh, I should have counted how many atoms are in ATP, but it'd probably be something like 80. Like it's a tiny molecule. Does not weigh very much. Your body produces in a given day your entire body weight in ATP because you have to constantly be burning it all day long. It's why cyanide kills people in movies when they're like, "You'll never take me," and they eat the pill and then they die right away because they have the suicide pill. That's a cyanide capsule, and it stops the electron transport chain in your mitochondria, and it kills you that fast because if you're not constantly producing ATP, you die immediately. And that's because it stops this basal metabolic rate, which is what you need to stay alive. Okay, that's enough about that. So it's a lot of the calories you burn. That basal metabolic rate is part of when you talk about metabolic adaptation to dieting and why people plateau or why it's easy for some people to lose weight or why people, the super annoying guy, it's like, I can't seem to gain weight no matter what I do. And you just want to punch him. Some people are blessed because they chose the right parents, which unfortunately we don't have any control over. They burn a lot of calories, and this has to do with hormones that we're going to get into, but BMR is a big deal, basal metabolic rate. Next up is a fun acronym, NEAT, which is the non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So thermo is heat, genesis is the creation of it. And so there are a lot of things that we do that are not strictly exercise. So exercise would be what you think of when you think of exercise. I went for a walk. Martrice made me throw a heavy ball against one of those things 50 times in a row. I hate Martrice. That's exercise. And and that's different from this, which is non-exercise activity, the heat that your body produces just doing regular stuff. What I'm doing right now is a fair amount of non-exercise activity thermogenesis. It's moving your arms while you talk, it's typing on a keyboard, it's walking around, all of the stuff that you do. So when you get the health tips or your Apple Watch is like, hey, you've been sitting still, time to move around. All of that stuff is trying to increase the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which again, now people will argue about percentage points one way or the other on this, but still the general idea of it being somewhere in the range of 15% of the calories you burn in a day is accurate. It's really hard to go through the day without walking to the bathroom. Again, if you are into a show enough, then you can just go in your pants, but that's rare. Like you generally you have to do stuff. You have to make it to the fridge, and so non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is another area where your body responds to the inputs that you give it. And when we talk about metabolic adaptation, you're dieting and you plateau, and you can't seem to lose any more weight, even though you're doing everything the same or even increasing what you are doing. One of the insidious things that happens, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, is they've measured this. They've done studies on this where they'll put pedometers on people, and they'll tell them it's not like a secret thing they do, but they'll measure the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and you can watch it decrease. And it's an involuntary thing. People aren't meaning to do it, but you can watch people's NEAT decrease as they decrease the amount of calories coming in because your body is smart. It has nutrient sensors. It wants you to stay alive. And so it's still operating off of a software system that was built for like, hey, last time we ate was a buffalo 3 weeks ago. And so it's going to decrease the calories that you're burning any way it can. It'll slow down your metabolic rate. It will decrease your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. If you've ever been through a particularly intense Metcon, or you chose to do 2 WODs in one day for some reason, and you find that you get home and your gravity feels twice as strong. You can't move off the couch. That's your body saying hey, well, we've done enough today, and your NEAT will decrease. So that's non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Next up is the TEF, the thermic effect of food, which again, percentage points one way or the other, that's different for different folks, but the general idea of this being somewhere in the range of 10 or 15% of calories is not far off. The thermic effect of food is, it doesn't get included in basal metabolic rate, because basal metabolic rate is just with the calories you have, what's your body doing to spend those outside of activity. This is specifically with the food that you bring into your mouth. Your body has to expend energy in order to harvest energy out of that food. And that has to do with things like bile secretion and the motility of your gut moving stuff through. But also on a biochemical level, your body has to figure out how, well, it knows how to. DNA is impressive, and what your enzymes can do is impressive, but it has to take amino acids and figure out, how do I turn this into glucose? Or it has to take chains of glucose strung together in these complex carbohydrates and chop them up and then burn that. It has to send that stuff either through glycolysis or through electron transport in your mitochondria to figure out how to net energy out of it. But all of that stuff takes energy to do it. It's kind of the equivalent of old-timey cars where they had to go out front and do this over and over to get the thing going. You've got to put in some energy in order to get the engine running and net energy out of the food. Thermic effect of food, by the way, is different for different foods. It's part of why that percentage is generally correct, but it's different for different foods. It is the lowest. You expend the least amount of energy processing fat, which is kind of makes sense, I guess. And so the thermic effect of food for fat is somewhere between 0% and 3% of the calories that you bring in from fat. For carbohydrates, it's somewhere between 10 and 15% of the energy that you are eating in the carbohydrate is being spent immediately just to process the carbohydrates. As you can guess, that's less for a pixie stick than it is for brown rice. And then for protein, it is by a pretty wide margin the highest. 20 to 30% of the calories that you consume when you have protein are spent just processing and breaking down the protein to get energy out of it. And so that means if you have 100 calories of steak, you technically, now you don't log it this way in MyFitnessPal or whatever, but like the truth biochemically is you really are only netting 70 to 80 calories out of that 100 calories of steak. It's part of why protein is awesome.